Hello everyone, my name is Arnav Jain. I am from 2BSc ANI and I will be discussing about the case study of corporate law, which is Ashbury Railways Carriage and Iron Company versus Riche. So before proceeding to the case, let's discuss that what is the ultra virus doctrine, because it is a major part of this case. So ultra doctrine virus means that it prevents a corporation from engaging in activities beyond its legal authority as defined in its memorandum of association or article of incorporation. So basically in this line it means that any company or any corporation who acts beyond the power or the legalities which have there mentioned in the MOA and AOA, it will be act as ultra virus doctrine. So let's move forward. Then, if any such ultra-virus act is generally void and enforceable, so the directors may be held personally liable for approving such action. So, if the directors knows that it is not mentioned, the things which are the company is doing, which is not mentioned in MOA and AOA, and if they are doing it, so the directors will be personally liable for the approving of such actions. Hence, it means that the company cannot do things which are not mentioned in the AOA or AOA. So now let's have a look at the plaintiff and defendant on the case study. So the plaintiff was Riche, who was a contractor, and defendant were the Ashbury Railway Carriage and Iron Company Limited. Now let's have a look at the fact of the case. So let's start with the fact of the cases. So the first fact we have of the case is that it started Ashbury Railways Carriage and Iron Company Limited entered into a contract with Riche to finance and construct the railway business in Belgium. So basically it happened is that Ashbury and Riche, they came in a contract. So Riche was a contractor. He needed money to make the construction of the railway thing. So he went to Riche and asked them for things. But according to the memorandum and everything, Ashbury did not have that they could finance the construction. They just had the business of construction, but they not had that they could finance it. So later, when the contract was signed through the company's directors, by both the company's directors signed the agreement and all with Riche. Then later, the company shareholder got to know about it. So they objected at the claiming that the railway construction was beyond the company's stated purposes and its memorandum of association. So as I told you before, the memorandum of association mentioned that the Ashbury company can only manufacture the railway, but they cannot finance to other contractors and give them money to build the railway thing. They hadn't mentioned it in the memorandum of association. So next, they argued that the contract was illegal and ultra virus, as we know from the before slides. Then Riche tried to sue the company for breach of contract and demanding compensation. So basically, when this happened, Riche tried to Riche told them it is the breach of contract that you guys gave me the money, then now you cannot come back because it was not mentioned memorandum and the director signed, and he tried to demand compensation for this thing, for the contract they made. Now, before looking at the court judgment, let's look at some legal questions about the case. The first question we have is that, was the contract ultra virus and therefore void? So the answer for this is, in Ashbury Railway Carriage and Iron Company Limited, which is 1875, the contract was ruled ultra virus, beyond the company's legal power, and therefore void. So the contract was ultra virus because it went beyond the company's stated objectives in the memorandum of association, as we discussed before. Ashbury Railway Carriage and Iron Company Limited was legally authorized only to manufacture and sell railway equipment, but it entered into a contract to finance and construct a railway, which was not included in the memorandum. So that's why the contract was void and considered as ultra virus. The question number 2 asks that, can a company act beyond the scope of its memorandum of association? So the answer for this is, company could not act beyond the scope of its memorandum of association. At the time, company law strictly requires company to operate within the objectives stated in their memorandum, since Ashbury memorandum allowed it only to manufacture and sell railway equipment, as they known as before, entering into a contract to finance illegal construction was ultra-vires beyond its legal power. So as a result, the contract was void and could not be enforced even if all the shareholders agreed also, the contract will be void. So like if the shareholders agree that this should be, but if it's ultra-vires and not mentioned in the memorandum of association, nobody can agree for it, and the contract will be void. The question number 3 asks that can a shareholder ratify an ultra vires contract? So the answer for this is no, because shareholders cannot ratify an ultra vires contract because it is void from the beginning ab initio. So basically from the starting only the contract will be void because they are going beyond their powers. Since the contract goes beyond the company's legal defined powers, it is in its memorandum of association, it has no legal effect and cannot be made valid. Even with anonymous shareholders' approval, this rule ensures that companies operate within their stated objectives and protect creditors and investors from unauthorized business activities. So it is basically a security from the investors and creditors from the unauthorized business activities the companies can do. Now we'll be moving forward to the court judgments which were passed by the court. So in the decision, the court ruled against Riche and held that the company was ultra-biased and the company was ultra-biased the company powers. Basically, the company was ultra-biased because they went beyond their powers as I mentioned in the memorandum of association. Second, any contract where company objective clause is void and enforceable, it was stated by the court. And the third, even if all shareholders agrees, the contract should not be ratified. So basically from the starting only we know all these points we have maintained. All the 3 points was told by the court that shareholders, even if they agree the contract is ratified, clause will be void and enforceable, and the contract ultra-vires is company powers. Now let's have a look at what key legal principle were established by this case. Now let's have a look at what key legal. So the key legal principle were established by the case was that the ultra-vires doctrine was reinforced after this case. So basically there were changes made in the ultra-vires doctrine. Then the second point is that the company must operate within the memorandum of association. It was strictly followed by the companies to follow their memorandum of association and what they have mentioned and not go beyond the powers. Third, the contract beyond a company's power are null and void. So the third key legal principle which was established. Now we will discuss that how this case study impacted on corporate law. So the first point in this topic we have that this case study shaped the corporate law for over a century. So this was a great example of ultra doctrine bias that the company should not go beyond the memorandum of association which they have petitioned, and if they go, so it will be the contract will be void. Second point, later modification like in Companies Act was made and that allowed companies for greater flexibility. So in 1989, the companies are allowed for greater flexibility. Third point we have is that modern companies can now include a broad objective clause to avoid ultra-vires issue. So there were many modern companies which now can include a broad objective clause to avoid the ultra-vires issues which in this case study we saw. Now let's have a look at the conclusion of the case study. So the final takeaways from this case study is that first point, the ultra-vires doctrine prevents companies from acting beyond their purpose. So the ultra-vires doctrine prevents companies to act like they can't go beyond the memorandum of association or article of association they have. Second, any unauthorized contract are void and unenforceable. So any contract which is not mentioned in the MOA, if they are done, it will be void and it will not be unenforceable. Third point we have is that this case laid a foundation for corporate governance and accountability. This case actually laid for the foundation like for the corporate governance and accountability in the corporate law, which helped a lot for the future companies to have a look about and focus on the ultra doctrine virus issues which could not let them for this void and unenforceable contracts. Thank you.